My sister's voice has always been the loudest in the room, especially when it was telling me I would never succeed. Some memories refuse to fade. They don't just linger in your mind, they carve themselves into you, shaping the way you see yourself long after the moment has passed. For me, that memory is my sister's laughter echoing through the house, the kind of laughter that didn't celebrate me, but cut me down. I grew up in the shadow of a sister who never let me forget that I was smaller, softer, weaker, and according to her, destined to fail. From the time we were children, it felt like every step I took was measured against her stride. Every dream I dared to whisper was drowned out by her certainty that I would never amount to much. We were only 2 years apart, but she seemed decades ahead of me. While I scribbled in notebooks, dreaming of creating something meaningful, she was already racking up medals, trophies, and accolades. If there was a spelling bee, she won it. If there was a debate, she dominated it. If there was a science fair, she didn't just enter, she conquered. Our parents would beam with pride as they placed her shiny awards on the living room shelf, the light from the window catching the gold and silver and reflecting back into my eyes like a cruel reminder. I wanted to be proud of her, I really did. But as I watched, I couldn't help but notice the empty space where my own achievements should have been. The truth was, I wasn't untalented. I just dreamed differently. While my sister thrived on structure and competition, I thrived on imagination. I would spend hours painting stories in my head, sketching characters or writing essays about things no one else in the family cared about. But to her, and eventually to everyone else, that wasn't ambition. That was a weakness. My sister had a way of twisting words into weapons, and she never hesitated to use them. Whenever I shared an idea, she would cut me down with a smirk. "You're too dreamy, too sensitive, too soft for the real world." It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, dripping with certainty, like she wasn't just stating an opinion but declaring an inevitable truth. She was so confident that everyone around her believed it too. Soon, my parents started repeating her phrases without even realizing it. Resentment. I hated that my voice never seemed, that my dreams were dismissed before I could even defend them. I hated that my family measured my worth by her accomplishments, as if her success set the standard for who I was allowed to be. And most of all, I hated that a part of me began to believe her words. There were nights I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, repeating her criticisms in my head. Too sensitive, too soft, too dreamy. I wondered if she was right. Maybe I was wasting my time. Maybe my visions were just fantasies destined to fade. Doubt crept into me like a poison, and for a while, I almost let it consume me. But then something else stirred. Something small, fragile but stubborn. A whisper that said, "What if she's wrong? What if sensitivity isn't weakness, but strength?" That whisper kept me alive when everything else tried to silence me. I started to notice the cracks in her perfection, the way she pushed too hard, the way she seemed more interested in defeating others than in truly creating something of her own. While she thrived on validation, I began to crave something deeper, purpose. I realized I didn't need to outshine her in the same way. I needed to carve my own path, one that wasn't about trophies or applause, but about meaning. But even with that revelation, the battle was far from over. My family's favoritism didn't fade overnight. At gatherings, relatives would crowd around my sister, asking about her latest achievements, barely glancing in my direction. When I dared to share my dreams, I was met with polite nods or thinly veiled skepticism. It was as if my ambitions existed in a separate, smaller reality, one that no one but me believed in. That duality tore at me, admiration for her brilliance and bitterness at my own invisibility. The breaking point came at one of those family dinners, the kind where everyone gathered around the long oak table, plates piled high with food, the air buzzing with conversation. I remember sitting across from her, my fork hovering over my plate as I listened to her recount yet another achievement. She had just been offered a prestigious internship, and the room words echoed in my head. I wanted to fight back, to scream that she was wrong, but the laughter around the table, nervous, awkward, but still there, silenced me. For the first time I realized my sister wasn't just competing with me. She was declaring war on my future. And that night, as I sat in the quiet aftermath of dinner, her words repeated in my mind, louder than ever. You'll never make it in that field. You don't have the grit. The first time she told me I would fail, I almost believed her. Her words from that family dinner stuck with me like a splinter under the skin, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore. You don't have the grit. For days, they replayed in my mind, echoing even when the room was silent. I wanted to push them away, to prove her wrong instantly, but the truth was, her confidence made me question everything. My sister never spoke unless she was certain, and certainty had always been her weapon. So when I finally got my first real chance to enter my industry, her voice came with me. I walked into that building not just carrying my dreams, but dragging the weight of her doubt behind me. It wasn't a glamorous opportunity. I wasn't stepping into the spotlight or landing a dream role. I was offered a tiny, temporary position, practically a glorified assistant, but it was in the field I loved. For me, it wasn't small. It was the first rung on a ladder I'd been aching to climb. The morning of my first day, I dressed carefully. Too carefully, perhaps. I pressed my shirt twice, changed shoes 3 times, and redid my hair until it was pulled back so tightly it gave me a headache. My hands shook as I clutched my bag on the train, whispering to myself that this was it. This was the moment everything started. But beneath my rehearsed confidence was the gnawing fear that she was right, that I wasn't built for this world. That first week was brutal. The office was fast, unforgiving, and loud. Everyone spoke in clipped tones, deadlines came like punches, and no one had the patience for mistakes. I stumbled constantly. I sent one email to the wrong client. I misplaced a file that took hours to find. I spilled coffee on my own notes before an important meeting. Each small mistake piled onto the next, and though no one fired me on the spot, I could feel the skepticism growing. The senior staff looked at me with polite tolerance, the kind reserved for major pitch, but it mattered. I worked late every night, double-checking details, convinced that if I nailed this, I could start proving myself. But when the presentation began and the slides appeared on the screen, my stomach dropped. Somehow, the files were corrupted. Images were missing, numbers were scrambled, and halfway through, the whole slideshow froze. The room filled with awkward silence. My manager's glare cut through me like a knife. I tried to recover, fumbling through printed notes, but the damage was done. The client's expression hardened. The meeting ended early, and my team's disappointment was palpable. Later, alone at my desk, I overheard 2 coworkers whispering, "She won't last long." The words burned. I wanted to scream that it wasn't my fault, that I had checked everything. But excuses wouldn't save me. In that moment, all I felt was failure pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. When I told my family, hoping for at least a shred of comfort, my sister pounced. "I told you," she said, her smirk curling as though she'd been waiting for this moment. "This industry eats people alive, and you're too soft." My parents didn't argue with her. My father just shook his head, muttering something about me needing a backup plan. My mother urged me to think practically, to find something safer, easier, less ambitious. It felt like the entire world had collapsed on me. I was drowning in doubt, caught between the sting of failure and the weight of their certainty. At night, lying in bed, I would replay every mistake, every mocking laugh, every dismissive glance. My chest ached with the thought that maybe they were all right. Maybe I had set myself up for heartbreak. Maybe dreaming big was just another form of foolishness. But there was a stubborn part of me that refused to let go. As much as I wanted to surrender, as tempting as it was to quit, there was a whisper inside me that said no. Not yet. Not like this. I couldn't accept my sister's words as prophecy. If I quit now, she would be right forever, and I would live my life in her shadow. I just her words anymore. They were everyone's. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting my sister's doubts. I was fighting an entire room of people who had already decided I would fail. Sometimes the only way to survive is to disappear. I stood in the kitchen that night, glass of water trembling in my hand, listening to my sister's words ripple through the living room like a verdict. She'll never last a year. What stung more than her voice was the laughter that followed, the nods of agreement, the quiet assent from people I had hoped would defend me. It wasn't just her opinion anymore. It was a consensus. My family, the people who were supposed to believe in me, had already written my story, and in their version, I failed before I even began. I swallowed the bitterness like medicine. For a moment, I wanted to walk back into that room and scream that they were wrong, that I would prove them all fools. But then I realized something important. Words wouldn't change their minds. Only results would. And until I had results, silence would be my shield. So I disappeared. Not from the world, but from their expectations. While my sister flaunted her latest achievements at family dinners, I stopped bringing up mine. I learned to nod, to smile faintly, to say little. If they wanted to believe I was invisible, I would let them. Meanwhile, behind that invisibility, I would build. Quietly, patiently, ruthlessly. The jobs I took weren't glamorous. They weren't even stable. I bounced from one small assignment to the next, organizing files, proofreading documents, assisting on projects where my name would never appear. I was underpaid, overlooked, and underestimated at every turn. People barely remembered my face, much less my contributions. More than once, I overheard variations of the same dismissal. She's just an assistant. She won't last long. Each word was another stone added to the wall they were building around me. But instead of letting it trap me, I used it to strengthen myself. If I couldn't be recognized, I would observe. If I couldn't lead, I would learn. Every humiliating dismissal became a lesson. Every overlooked effort a study in how the system worked. At night, I kept a journal. Its pages to touch, visions of what I could create if given the chance. They were messy, half-formed, but they were mine. On nights when the doubt pressed so hard I could barely breathe, I opened those pages and reminded myself why I was still here. My sister's voice haunted me, yes, but in those pages my own voice began to grow louder. Still, survival wasn't easy. Being invisible comes at a cost. I endured condescension that sliced deeper than outright cruelty. Once, after I made a small suggestion in a meeting, a manager chuckled and said, "That's cute, but let the adults handle this." The room laughed, and I forced myself to smile even as my stomach twisted. Another time when a senior colleague introduced the team at a client dinner, he skipped my name entirely, moving past me as if I were an empty chair. I swallowed the humiliation, but later, in my journal, I wrote a single line. One day, they'll know my name. Money was tight too. Some months I barely scraped enough to pay rent. I skipped outings with friends, avoided family gatherings to escape the endless comparisons to my sister, and learned to stretch meals further than they should go. There were nights I cried into bowls of cheap pasta, wondering if this struggle was worth it, if maybe my family was right to think I was chasing a fantasy. But each time the doubt rose, I reminded myself of the alternative, quitting. If I gave up, then my sister's words became prophecy, and I refused to let her write my future. So I worked, I learned, I endured, I collected every small win like a secret treasure, a compliment from a client, a task finished ahead of deadline, a problem solved without being asked. They were crumbs, but they sustained me, and slowly those crumbs began to form a trail. There was one project in particular that shifted something inside me. I was tasked with compiling background research for a campaign no one expected to succeed. It was grunt work, data gathering, fact-checking, the kind of task usually forgotten once the real work began. But I approached it like it mattered. I spent nights digging deeper than anyone asked, finding insights buried in obscure reports, weaving them into something coherent and fresh. When the team presented the campaign, one executive paused and said, "Where did this research come from? This is solid." The manager took credit, of course. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. I knew. And more at my tiny kitchen table, Scribbling in my journal by the glow of a single lamp, it happened. My laptop chimed with a new email. Tired, I almost ignored it, assuming it was another routine rejection or a meaningless update. But when I clicked it open, the words froze me in place. We'd like to interview you for a major project. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't grunt work. This wasn't another invisible task. This was an invitation into the very world I had been clawing toward in silence. For the first time, the door I had been pushing against for years had cracked open, and it had my name on it. For the first time, someone was asking me what I could build, not what I couldn't. The email glowed on my laptop screen like a flare in the dark. We'd like to interview you for a major project. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My hands hovered above the keys, my breath caught between disbelief and hope. After years of being overlooked, mocked, and silenced, here it was, an invitation, a chance to step out of the shadows and finally be seen. But almost as quickly as the thrill hit me, the doubt crept in. What if it was a mistake? What if they had sent it to the wrong person? What if they realized halfway through the interview that I wasn't what they thought I was? My sister's voice rose in my head like a chorus I could never silence. She'll never last a year. Still, I replied with a simple, yes, I'd be honored. The days leading up to the interview were a blur of preparation and panic. I studied the company's work late into the night, memorized statistics until they blurred together, and practiced answers in the mirror until my throat went raw. But no matter how much I rehearsed, the same questions gnawed at me. Would I choke when it mattered? Would my voice shake? Would they see me the way my family saw me, as a dreamer destined to collapse under pressure? The morning of the interview, I woke before dawn. My tiny apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat at my kitchen table in the suit I had ironed 3 times, staring at my reflect table separated. The kind of table where careers were decided in whispers. Thank you for coming, one of them said, his voice professional but flat. We're considering you for a lead role in a project that's ambitious. Tell us why you think you can handle it. My mouth went dry. For a second, I saw my sister's smirk, the family's nods of agreement, the words echoing in my memory. She'll never make it in that field. My body threatened to fold under the weight of those voices. But then I remembered the years of silence I had endured, the journals filled with lessons, the endless nights of invisible work. I remember the research project where my fingerprints had been all over the success, even if no one spoke my name. So I straightened my back, forced my breath to steady, and began. I didn't give them the rehearsed answers I had practiced in the mirror. Instead, I spoke about what I had lived. I told them about starting at the bottom, about being underestimated, about learning by listening when no one thought I was paying attention. I told them how empathy had taught me to see patterns others ignored, how resilience had been carved into me by humiliation, how silence had made me sharper, not smaller. As the words spilled out, I stopped hearing my sister's voice and started hearing my own, stronger, clearer, fuller than I had ever allowed before. For the first time, they weren't asking me what I lacked. They weren't asking me why I thought I didn't belong. They were asking me what I could build. And I had an answer. By the time I finished, the room was silent. The woman with the sharp eyes tapped her pen thoughtfully against her notebook. Finally, she leaned forward and asked, "What happens if you fail?" The question hit like ice water. Failure was a wound I knew too well. Images flashed in my mind, the laughter in meetings, the condescending smiles, the smirk on Richard's face from my corporate chapter. But I refused to shrink. I met her gaze and said, "If I fail, I learn. If I fall, I rise. And every time I rise stronger." The words left me shaking, but they were mine, unpolished and raw. When the interview ended, they offered polite nods. No smiles, no clues. I left the building with my stomach in knots, convinced I had said too much, be the end of everything I had clawed toward. That weekend, I returned home for a family dinner. My chest swelled with pride, eager to share the news. Maybe this time, finally, they would believe in me. Around the table, I announced it. I've been chosen to lead a major project. It could change everything for me. For a moment, there was silence. My father cleared his throat, offering a cautious, "That's good, honey, but you need to be careful." My mother smiled faintly, her eyes filled more with worry than pride. And then, as always, my sister spoke louder than anyone. "Make or break, huh?" she said with a smirk. "Then I guess we'll see how long you last this time." Her laughter stung sharper than ever, but I bit down on my tongue. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself, because deep down, I knew this time was different. Days later, as I prepared for the project kickoff, the lead executive pulled me aside. His tone was calm, but his words were heavy as stone. "If this fails, your career ends here." The room seemed to tilt. My chest tightened. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a trial by fire, and failure was not an option. The higher I climbed, the heavier their doubts became. The words of the project lead rang in my ears for days. "If this fails, your career ends here." It wasn't advice. It wasn't encouragement. It was a sentence. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything I had clawed toward would collapse like a house of cards. And worse, I knew if that happened, my sister would be the first to say, "I told you so." From the very first day, the project felt like a battlefield. The conference room where the kickoff meeting was held might as well have been a war room. A dozen colleagues, each more seasoned and confident than I was, sat around the long polished table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Some looked at me with polite curiosity, others with open skepticism. None looked at me with trust. As I introduced myself as the project lead, I felt their stares press into me like weights. My voice wavered for half a second before I steadied it, outlining the goals, timelines, and responsibilities. On the surface, I projected confidence. Inside, my stomach churned. It was as though everyone was waiting for me to stumble, eager to confirm what they already suspected, that I was in over my head. The first mistake— maybe I was a rookie, but I wasn't careless. Still, I carried that mistake with me like a scar, terrified of making another. But mistakes, like storms, never come alone. A week later, I miscalculated a budget estimate. The numbers weren't wildly off, but they were off enough to make the finance team question my competence. Whispers began to spread in the office, subtle at first, then sharper. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She's just a placeholder. She'll never make it to the end of this project." Each whisper found its way to me, even when no one said it directly. You can always tell when people doubt you. It's in their sidelong glances, their polite smiles, their forced patience. And the higher the pressure rose, the louder those whispers became in my head. At night, I would collapse at my kitchen table, my journal open in front of me, pen poised but unmoving. Instead of writing lessons, I found myself writing questions. Am I cut out for this? Did I bite off more than I can chew? Was my sister right all along? The doubts that had once been background noise were now pounding like drums. And then, as if fate had been waiting for the perfect moment, my sister called. Her voice was sugar-coated at first, asking how I was, pretending to care, but it didn't take long for her to cut through the pretense. "I heard you're leading a big project," she said, her tone laced with amusement. "That's bold. But from what I hear, you've already made a few mistakes. See? I told you. This isn't your world." Her laugh was like nails on glass. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened, forcing myself not to respond with the anger boiling inside me. If I snapped, she would only take it as proof that I was unraveling. So I bit my tongue, let her laughter echo, and when the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the wall, every nerve in my body on fire. I wanted to quit right then. I wanted to throw the project back at the executives and tell them to find someone better. I wanted to free myself from the crushing weight of their expectations and the sharper weight of her scorn. But quitting meant handing her the victory. Quitting meant proving her right, and that I couldn't bear. So I did the only thing I knew how. I pushed harder. I arrived earlier than everyone else, staying late into— At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, but then it happened again, and again. Information that should have been locked within our walls was appearing in conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't bad luck. Someone was leaking our work. The realization made my blood run cold. It wasn't just doubt and mistakes I was battling anymore. It was sabotage. And as I stared at the documents on my desk, piecing it together, one thought consumed me. Someone on my team wants me to fail. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone I trusted. When I first realized that details from my project were leaking, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe I had misremembered what I had shared. Maybe someone else had slipped up without realizing it. I wanted to believe it was just carelessness, because the alternative, sabotage, was almost too heavy to face. But the evidence grew undeniable. Information that should have been locked in confidential files was appearing in the mouths of people who had no business knowing it. This wasn't coincidence. It was betrayal. For days, I walked through the office with a pit in my stomach, watching every face, every movement. I studied my team members the way a detective studies suspects, listening not just to their words, but to the silences between them. Paranoia became my shadow. Every whispered conversation sounded sinister. Every casual glance felt loaded. And the more I searched for answers, the more alone I felt. The worst part was knowing it had to be someone close. Leaks like these don't happen from the outside. They come from within, from the people you share deadlines and late nights with, the people who smile at you across the table while slowly carving the knife they'll drive into your back. I combed through email chains, cross-checked documents, tracked timestamps. It was exhausting, painstaking work. I barely slept, my mind whirring long after the office went dark. And then, slowly, a pattern emerged. Certain files had been accessed outside normal hours. Edits had been made at strange times. The same name kept appearing in the logs. A colleague I had trusted. Someone who had sat across from me in meetings and nodded along with every idea. When I confronted the evidence, my hands trembled so violently I had to set the papers down to steady myself. To my sister. My chest tightened as the pieces locked together. It wasn't just sabotage. It was personal. My own sister had extended her reach into my world, using her network to undermine me from the inside. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had expected doubt from my family. I had expected scorn from my sister. But I hadn't expected her shadow to reach into my work, to turn allies into spies, to weaponize my own team against me. It was one thing for her to mock me at family dinners. It was another for her to poison the very foundation I was building. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal open but empty, the pen motionless in my hand. What do you write when your worst fear comes true? What do you write when the knife in your back is held by someone you trusted and guided by someone you thought you had left behind? I stared at the blank page until the words finally spilled. She won't stop until I break, but I won't give her that victory. If there was one thing my silence had taught me, it was how to listen. I began to watch more closely, not just the files and logs, but the body language of my team. I noticed the way my betrayer avoided eye contact when sensitive topics came up. I noticed the hesitation before they spoke, the subtle flick of their eyes toward their phone. My empathy, the very trait my sister mocked as weakness, became my weapon. While others underestimated me, I read them like an open book. I started setting small traps, harmless pieces of information fed selectively, different details given to different people. Within days, one of those details appeared outside the team, and I knew, with certainty, who the leak was. The knowledge didn't bring relief, it brought grief. Losing trust is like losing a limb. You feel the phantom pain long after it's gone. I wanted to confront them, to demand why, but what would it change? They had chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. And yet, as broken as I felt, there was also a strange strength in the clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the sabotage. The enemy was real, and I had proof. I thought the worst was over once I uncovered the truth, but betrayal has a way of multiplying. It felt like someone had reached through the screen to grab me by the throat. For the first time in months, I truly felt afraid. Not just of failing, not just of being mocked, but of being destroyed. Whoever had sent that message wasn't warning me. They were promising me what would happen if I kept going. For days, I carried the fear like a weight in my chest. My hands trembled when I logged into my computer. My stomach churned before every meeting. I tried to mask it, to walk into rooms with my chin lifted, but I could feel my control fraying. Everyone was watching, waiting for me to stumble, and now I was certain that if I fell, someone would be there to make sure I never stood again. And then, one late evening, when the office was nearly empty, she appeared. Elaine Monroe. Her name carried weight. She wasn't just respected, she was legendary. A senior executive who had survived decades in the industry without ever bowing, without ever breaking. People whispered her name with a mix of fear and awe, and when she walked through the halls, even the most arrogant voices lowered. I had admired her from a distance for months, though she had never spoken more than a passing hello to me. That night, she stopped at my desk, her eyes sharp but unreadable. "You look like hell," she said flatly. I froze, unsure how to respond. Was this the moment she confirmed I didn't belong? But before I could stammer an excuse, she pulled the chair across from me and sat down. "People are circling you," her tone low but steady. "You've made enemies, and enemies in this business don't just argue. They erase." Her words hit me harder than the anonymous text. Somehow she knew. She saw what I was too afraid to admit, that I was being hunted. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. My voice was small, hesitant. Her gaze didn't soften. "Because I've been where you are. I know the look of someone one step away from being chewed up and spit out. And because, whether you realize it or not, you have something they don't." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Empathy," she said simply. "The very thing they mock you for. You read people. You see them. That makes you dangerous, but only if you learn to use it." Elaine became my quiet mentor. Not officially, never officially. She didn't coddle me or shield me. She observed me in meetings, pulled me aside afterward, and dissected my performance with brutal honesty. "You talk too fast when you're nervous. Slow down. Make them lean in. You give away your best ideas too early. Hold them back. Timing is power. Stop apologizing in your tone. Own the room, even when you're wrong." It wasn't easy to hear. Some nights, I left her office feeling raw, exposed, like she had stripped every layer of armor I had left. But slowly, something shifted. I began walking into meetings differently. Instead of shrinking at interruptions, I paused until the room grew quiet again. Instead of flooding people with ideas, I held one back, letting curiosity build before dropping it like a stone in still water. Instead of waiting for permission, I spoke with the certainty my sister had always wielded against me. The whispers didn't vanish, but I saw the change. Colleagues began watching me differently, not as the rookie fumbling her way through, but as someone unpredictable, someone not so easy to dismiss. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving the weight of expectations, I was shifting them. Elaine's lessons went beyond strategy. She taught me how to read the invisible currents in the room, the subtle alliances, the hidden rivalries, the moments when silence spoke louder than words. "Every boardroom has predators," she said once. "Don't try to be one of them. Just learn how they hunt. Then you'll know where to stand." Her mentorship lit a fire I hadn't known I carried. The fear was still there, the anonymous threat still lurking in the back of my mind, but now it sat alongside something stronger: resolve. I wasn't here by accident. I wasn't here by charity. I had earned this seat, and I would not give it up without a fight. One evening, after another grueling day, Elaine called me into her office. She stood by the window, the city skyline glowing behind her like a battlefield of lights. She didn't smile when I entered. She rarely did. "You've grown," she said, "faster than most. You're learning to turn their weapons back on them." Good. I waited, unsure if this was praise or prelude. "But understand this," she continued, turning to harder than ever. She wasn't just my sister anymore, she was my rival. Elaine's warning had been haunting me for weeks. If you succeed, prepare. Your sister will come harder than ever. At the time, I thought she was exaggerating, maybe even testing me. But I should have known better. My sister never left a challenge unanswered, and the moment she sensed my progress, she moved into my world like a storm. It started subtly at first. A news article here, a press release there. Suddenly, my sister's name was being linked to the same industry where I was clawing my way upward. She had transitioned into the field with her usual flair, taking a role in a firm well known for its polished professional image. Articles praised her brilliant move, emphasizing how seamlessly she adapted, how natural her leadership appeared. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my own project, but the comparisons came quickly and they came loud. At family gatherings, relatives whispered, both sisters in the same industry. Imagine that. At dinners, my parents beamed at her updates while casting cautious, questioning glances at me. On social media, side-by-side headlines popped up. Sister duo on the rise. Who will reign supreme? The irony was unbearable. For years, she had mocked me for chasing dreams in this field, ridiculed me as unrealistic, sensitive, weak. And now she was here, parading herself as the true professional, the model of what success should look like. Every article that praised her felt like a knife in my chest. Every whisper that compared us fanned the flames of resentment. At first, I kept quiet. Silence had been my shield for so long that it felt natural. But silence this time didn't protect me. It only fueled her dominance. She thrived on the comparisons, using them to paint herself as the sharp, capable sister and me as the fragile, fumbling one. The breaking point came one night at a networking event. It was supposed to be a neutral ground, professionals mingling, shaking hands, exchanging cards. I walked in wearing the suit Elaine had convinced me to buy, standing taller than I ever had before. For a moment, I felt like I belonged. And then she appeared. My sister walked into the room like she owned it. Every step deliberate, every gesture polished. She was dressed in a tailored white suit, condescension disguised as pride. She's finding her way. It's adorable, really. Laughter. Not cruel, but polite. The kind of laughter that stings more because it pretends to be harmless. My face burned. I clenched my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I couldn't hold back anymore. I turned to her, my voice sharper than I had ever allowed in public. Finding my way? At least I'm building something of my own, not riding on someone else's coattails. The air in the circle shifted instantly. The polite laughter died. Eyes widened. My sister's smirk faltered for the briefest moment before she tilted her head, her voice smooth as silk. "Careful," she said. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't your world after all." The conversation broke apart awkwardly, colleagues scattering, but the fire inside me didn't fade. That night, for the first time, I didn't wait until I was alone to confront her. I cornered her near the exit, my voice trembling with rage. "Why are you here?" I demanded. "Why now? This was my path. You mocked me for years, told me I'd fail, and now you're standing here pretending this was always your dream." She laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Dreams change. Opportunities arise. And honestly, you should thank me. I'm raising the standard for both of us." "Or trying to erase me," I shot back. Her eyes glittered, cold and triumphant. "Erase you? You've done that yourself. You've always been the weaker one, sensitive, naive. Do you really think you can outlast me in this world? I was born to win." The words sliced through me, but this time I didn't let them break me. I stood taller, meeting her glare head on. "Maybe you were born to win trophies, but I wasn't born to quit." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with years of rivalry, years of unspoken wounds. Sparks seemed to crackle in the air, and I knew then that whatever we had once been as sisters was gone. She wasn't just family anymore. She was competition. She was my rival. The battle line had been drawn, and as I turned to leave, her voice followed me, low and venomous, slipping into my ear like poison. When you fail, I'll be there to watch. Carrying that heaviness, deadlines pressed against my chest like bricks stacked too high. My inbox overflowed with criticism disguised as feedback. My colleagues whispered louder now, some suggesting I wasn't ready for the pressure, others speculating whether my sister's arrival in the industry had outshined me completely. Every time I passed a glass-walled meeting room, I imagined they were talking about me, dissecting my every move, predicting the moment I would collapse. I tried to drown it out by burying myself in work. But even my project, the thing that had once fueled me with pride, began to feel like a noose tightening around my neck. Every mistake, no matter how small, was magnified. Every delay felt like a catastrophe. Once, I left a critical document on my desk overnight and returned to find it missing, only to be accused of carelessness by my supervisor. I wanted to scream that it had been taken, sabotaged, but what proof did I have? All they saw was incompetence. The pressure mounted with each passing week. My body showed the toll before my mind admitted it. I woke with pounding headaches, my hands shook when I typed, and coffee replaced food as my only fuel. My skin broke out, my hair dulled, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the tired, hollow-eyed woman staring back. My passion, the fire that had once made me believe I belonged, had turned into ash. And yet, I kept pushing, because the alternative was worse, proving my sister right. But pressure has a way of cracking even the strongest mask. The breaking point came late one night, alone in the office. The city lights outside glowed like distant stars, but inside, the silence was suffocating. My desk was buried in drafts, notes, timelines, and still, nothing seemed good enough. I was chasing perfection like a mirage, each step closer revealing another flaw, another weakness. I dropped my pen and buried my face in my hands. For the first time since I had entered this world, I let myself fall apart completely. The sobs ripped out of me uncontrollably, loud and raw, echoing off the sterile office walls. I cried for every insult, every betrayal, every sleepless night. I cried for the desk, its worn leather cover frayed from months of use. I pulled it toward me, my fingers trembling, and opened it to the first pages. There they were, the words I had written in silence when no one believed in me, the late-night reflections, the lessons I had learned from humiliation, the strategies Elaine had whispered in passing, the notes Ethan had once encouraged me to keep. Each page was a reminder of battles I had already survived. My handwriting was jagged, sometimes smeared with tears, but the words carried a strength I had forgotten I possessed. I read entries about being underestimated, about Richard's sabotage, about the first time I stood my ground in a meeting. I read about the night I decided sensitivity wasn't weakness, but strategy. And slowly, my tears shifted. They weren't just grief anymore. They were fuel. The journal reminded me that I had always been underestimated, always been mocked, always been told I wasn't enough. And yet here I was, still standing, still fighting. If doubt was poison, then resilience was the antidote. I closed the journal, pressing my palm against its cover as if to absorb the strength it carried. For the first time in weeks, I took a deep, steady breath. Maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I wasn't invincible. But I was still here, and that had to mean something. The next morning, I carried the journal with me like armor. I still felt the weight of deadlines, the sting of criticism, but I also carried the memory of what I had already survived. When whispers rose in the hallways, I didn't flinch. When my sister's name appeared in yet another article comparing us, I refused to read it. I kept my eyes on my work, my hands steady, my heart fueled by the reminder that resilience wasn't loud. It was quiet, relentless persistence. And then, just when I had begun to steady myself again, the world shifted. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through emails, most of them routine. Budget approvals, meeting reminders, client updates, when one subject line froze me in place. Congratulations, your project has been nominated. My pulse quickened as I clicked it open. The words glowed on the screen, surreal and electrifying. My project. The one they said I wasn't ready for. The one they tried to sabotage. The one my sister had mocked. Sister would not let that go unchallenged. The world that once ignored me was suddenly watching. I stared at the email on my screen until the words blurred. Nominated. It looked unreal, like a word plucked from someone else's life, not mine. I read it once, twice, 10 times. My hands trembled as though my body couldn't contain the rush of adrenaline flooding through me. The project that had nearly broken me, the one they whispered would collapse, the one my sister sneered at, had been recognized. Not just internally, not just quietly, but publicly. The news spread faster than I could have imagined. Within 24 hours, media outlets picked it up. The underdog nominee, a surprising contender, emerges. My name was suddenly in headlines, my photo appearing alongside articles analyzing the industry's unexpected star. I should have felt triumphant, but instead my chest tightened with a new kind of fear. For years I had been invisible. Now I was center stage, and the spotlight burns just as much as it blinds. At the office, colleagues congratulated me through tight smiles and thinly veiled envy. Some were gracious, others barely masked their bitterness. I could feel the shift in the air, the way people began calculating, rethinking, deciding whether aligning with me would benefit them or hurt them. The whispers didn't stop, but they changed tone. No longer questioning whether I'd last, but debating how long my lucky streak would hold. At home, the reactions were even sharper. My parents called, their voices thick with surprise. "We saw the article," my father said cautiously. "This is impressive." The pride I had craved for years was there, but diluted, wrapped in disbelief, as if they couldn't quite reconcile the girl who once stumbled through her first internship with the woman now being recognized by an entire industry. My mother's tone was warmer, but laced with worry. "We're proud, sweetheart, just don't let it go to your head." And then there was my sister. Her text arrived late that night. "Congrats on your little nomination. Don't mistake it for a win." The words dripped with condescension. Each letter another reminder that no matter what I achieved, I disappeared again. That fear followed me into the quiet moments, gnawing at me like a parasite. At night, I lay awake replaying every mistake I'd made, every stumble, every crack in my confidence. The thought echoed in my head, what if I don't deserve this? What if I'm just an imposter who got lucky? Imposter syndrome is a cruel thief. It doesn't just steal your joy. It makes you question whether you have the right to hold it in the first place. I poured my doubts into my journal, scribbling furiously until the pages were covered in ink. But even my own words weren't enough this time. For the first time in months, I felt the temptation to retreat, to shrink back into the silence where no one could see me fail. That's when Elaine stepped in. She called me into her office the morning after the nomination hit the news. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't smile. Instead, she shut the door, folded her arms, and looked at me with those razor-sharp eyes. "You're panicking," she said bluntly. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the truth was written all over me. The bags under my eyes, the way my shoulders curled inward, the tremor in my hands. "I don't belong here," I whispered, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "They're all watching me now, waiting for me to fail. And maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not ready." Elaine stepped closer, her voice steady, cutting through my fear like a knife. "Listen to me. Every person in this business started where you are. Doubted, underestimated, afraid. The difference between those who make it and those who don't isn't talent, it's persistence. You've already survived storms that would have drowned most people. You're not an imposter. You're proof." Her words were firm, but it was the next thing she said that lodged in my chest. "Do you know why they're afraid of you? Because you don't play by their rules. You don't destroy, you build. And in this industry, that's revolutionary." I swallowed hard, tears burning the back of my eyes. "But what if I lose?" "Then you lose on your own terms," she said. "And trust me, there's more power in that than you realize." Her belief steadied me. With her guidance, I began preparing for what lay ahead. She pushed me harder than ever, challenging my presentations, tearing apart my strategies, name called, proving not just to the world, but to myself that I had always belonged. But dreams have a way of drawing shadows. Late one evening, as I packed up my bag, my phone buzzed. I expected a reminder, maybe a text from Elaine. Instead, the message on the screen made my blood run cold. Don't celebrate yet. Awards can be stolen too. The words glowed like a threat, as chilling as the first anonymous text I had received months ago. My hands tightened around the phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. And someone wanted to make sure my victory never arrived. Success is never as glamorous as it looks. It's survival behind the scenes. From the outside, the nomination looked like triumph. Articles painted me as the underdog story the industry craved. Photos circulated with headlines calling me the surprise contender, the one who had defied the odds. To the world, it seemed like my moment had arrived. But behind the curtain, I quickly learned that success wasn't about the trophy. It was about politics, deals, and power. And I was stepping into an arena where my sister already knew the rules. The first signs came quietly. Invitations to networking dinners stopped arriving in my inbox. Calls that used to be returned within hours now went unanswered for days. I would walk into a room and conversations would pause, then resume in hushed tones. On paper, I was a nominee. In reality, I was being sidelined. It didn't take long to understand why. Awards aren't just about merit, they're about influence. The people who vote, the committees who decide, they aren't immune to relationships and favors. And my sister, with her polished smile and deep network, was already weaving herself into those circles. I saw her face everywhere. On panels, in glossy magazine spreads, shaking hands with industry veterans whose approval mattered more than any applause. The smear campaigns came next. Small at first, like whispers drifting through the air. She's not ready. Her project was a fluke. She didn't do it alone. I'd scroll through blogs and see anonymous comments tearing apart my credibility, dissecting every flaw in my work, even mocking my background. Someone even posted that I had been handed the nomination out of pity, not merit. The words sliced deep. Employees, interns, assistants, the invisible people who had watched me all along started sending messages. We're rooting for you. You inspire us. Don't let them scare you. Some even slipped me notes in passing, small tokens of encouragement that reminded me I wasn't as alone as I felt. And then came one message that I'll never forget. A woman I had met years ago during one of my lowliest jobs sent me an email. I barely remembered her, but she remembered me. You once stayed late to help me fix a mistake that wasn't even yours, she wrote. I've never forgotten it. You deserve this nomination. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words hit harder than any headline. They reminded me that while my sister was busy dazzling the powerful, I had built something quieter but just as strong. Respect. Not from those who controlled the stage, but from those who kept the stage standing. Elaine noticed the shift in me. She pulled me aside after one particularly brutal week of headlines. They want to break your spirit before the ceremony, she said. Don't let them. You've already won more than they realize. You've made people believe in you. That's a currency your sister can't counterfeit. I held on to that truth like a lifeline. But resilience doesn't erase pain. It only teaches you how to carry it. And as the weeks ticked down to the ceremony, the weight grew heavier. Every article praising my sister chipped at me. Every whisper of doubt chipped at me. Every night alone with my thoughts chipped at me. The tension finally snapped at a press event. Reporters swarmed us, snapping photos, throwing questions like darts. My sister stood beside me, glowing under the lights, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. When asked about the competition, she answered smoothly, "It's always wonderful to see fresh faces. My sister is brave for trying." The crowd chuckled. I clenched my fists, forcing myself not to react. But then she leaned into the microphone, her voice clear, her eyes locked on mine. She'll never win, not against me. The room gasped. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. And in that instant, the rivalry that had once been confined to whispers and family dinners was unleashed into the public. Every light felt like it was burned. Parents' cautious skepticism, and above all, my sister's relentless taunts. You don't have the grit. "You'll never last a year. You'll never win, not against me." The words looped endlessly, louder than the applause I'd begun to receive. I wanted desperately to believe I was ready, but self-doubt is a clever enemy. It waits until the nights are long and the silence is sharp. Then it whispers, "What if they were all right? What if this was just luck? What if tomorrow you're exposed for the fraud you've always feared you are?" Those whispers haunted me as I prepared. My suit hung ready in my closet, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. My acceptance speech sat in drafts, but I couldn't bring myself to practice it. Every time I tried, my throat closed, as though the words were too heavy to lift into the air. It was Elaine who broke the spiral. She called me into her office one evening, the skyline glowing through her windows, the city stretching endlessly behind her. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She looked at me with the same piercing eyes that had cut through me from the beginning and asked, "What are you afraid of?" I tried to answer with something polished, something professional, but the truth slipped out raw. "I'm afraid I'll lose. I'm afraid I'll prove them all right. My sister, my family, everyone who ever doubted me." For a long moment, Elaine said nothing. Then she leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Listen to me carefully. You don't need to win for them. You need to win for you, not for their validation, not for their applause, for you. Because you're the one who stayed when it was easier to leave. You're the one who kept building when they told you to quit. And if you walk into that ceremony tomorrow, you've already won more than they will ever understand." Her words didn't erase my fear, but they reframed it. Winning wasn't about silencing my sister or proving my family wrong. It was about proving to myself that the years of pain, humiliation, and resilience meant something, that I hadn't endured for nothing. That night, I didn't sleep, but I didn't spiral either. I sat at my desk, my journal open, and replayed my entire journey. I saw the girl crying in the office restroom, gripping the sink as she questioned if she belonged. I saw
Enough. The final days before the ceremony felt like a montage of survival. Late nights spent rehearsing my speech alone in front of a mirror, my eyes bloodshot but my voice steadier each. Early mornings walking the city streets in the cold, repeating Elaine's words to myself like a mantra. Win for you. Hours at my desk, refining every detail of my project in case questions came, determined to walk in with no cracks for them to exploit. I pushed my body to its limits. Coffee replaced meals, adrenaline replaced sleep. But for the first time, it wasn't just desperation keeping me upright. It was fire. A fire born not of anger at my sister, not of the desire to prove her wrong, but of the realization that my story mattered, that I mattered. Still, fear lingered like a shadow. On the morning of the ceremony, as I buttoned my suit, I stared at my reflection and felt the familiar tremor of doubt. My hair was styled, my makeup done, my outfit sharp. But the reflection didn't feel like me. It felt like a version I had borrowed, a costume I wasn't sure I could fill. I almost reached for my phone to call Elaine to beg her for reassurance, but then I stopped. I didn't need her words this time. I needed mine. I opened my journal one last time and wrote, "You are not here by accident. You are here because you stayed when others would have quit. Whatever happens tonight, you've already won." I closed the journal, slipped it into my bag, and walked out the door. The city buzzed with energy as limousines lined the streets outside the venue. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted names, and the crowd roared with excitement. It was everything I had once dreamed of, and everything I had once feared. As I stepped toward the building, every light felt like it was burning me alive, exposing every insecurity I carried. And then, just when I thought I had steadied myself enough to walk inside, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my clutch, expecting maybe a note from Elaine, maybe a kind word from one of the juniors who had been rooting for me. But the message on the screen froze me in my tracks. "Don't embarrass us tomorrow." It was from her, my sister.
Room, dreaming of the day I might step into that world. And yet, standing there now, I felt like an imposter wrapped in satin, trying to blend into a script she hadn't been written for. The whispers followed me as I walked inside. Some admiring, some skeptical, most calculating. I caught fragments as I passed. That's her, the underdog. Can you believe she made it here? She doesn't stand a chance against her sister. Her. The thought made my stomach twist even before I saw her. And then she arrived. My sister swept into the venue like a queen entering her throne room. Cameras flashed brighter, reporters leaned in closer, the crowd surged toward her. She was dressed to dominate, a gown of shimmering silver that seemed to catch every light, her hair sculpted to perfection, her smile radiant but razor-edged. She thrived under the gaze, turning every movement into theater. And then, inevitably, her eyes found mine. Her smirk was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but I saw it clearly. It was the same smirk she had worn at family dinners, at networking events. At every moment she thought she had me cornered. Tonight, it wasn't just a smirk. It was a message. You don't belong here. I do. I forced myself to hold her gaze, refusing to look away. My heart pounded, my throat tight. But I reminded myself of Elaine's words. Win for you. Not for them, for you. Inside the main hall, the stage towered above rows of glittering tables. Gold-trimmed curtains framed the podium where the hosts would stand, and the giant screen displayed the categories, a countdown ticking closer to mine. The air buzzed with anticipation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. It was a room built for celebration, but all I felt was the thrum of my own pulse, echoing louder than the applause. I found my seat at a table near the front, close enough to the stage that I could see every detail of the podium, but far enough to feel the distance between me and the prize. The seat card bore my name in elegant script, and seeing it there, visible, undeniable, almost brought tears to my eyes. For years I had scribbled my name into journals no one else would read. Tonight, it was engraved in the conversations hushed, anticipation sharpened. This was it. The moment I had been crawling towards for years, the moment that had nearly broken me more times than I could count. The host's voice filled the hall, smooth and commanding. And now, the nominees for Best Innovation. My name rang out first. Applause rippled, cameras turned, spotlights swung toward me. My face appeared on the giant screen, smiling in the photo they had chosen. But in reality, my chest was heaving, my heart threatening to pound out of my ribs. The other nominees followed, including hers. When my sister's name was announced, the applause was louder, longer, fueled by her network, her reputation, her carefully crafted image. She waved gracefully, her silver gown catching the light, her smirk flashing toward me once more as if to remind me, this is my world, not yours. The montage of projects played on the screen, my work among them. I watched as images of sleepless nights, of battles fought in silence, were condensed into polished clips. It looked so smooth, so effortless, stripped of the blood and tears it had cost me. For the first time, I saw my journey not as a string of humiliations, but as proof that I had built something real. But even as pride flickered, doubt returned. What if it wasn't enough? What if, after everything, the world still chose her? The host's voice broke the silence again, drawing out the tension with practiced drama. And the winner is... For the first time, my name silenced her voice. The pause before the announcement stretched into eternity. My lungs burned as though I had been holding my breath for years, not seconds. Every nerve in my body braced for the inevitable, the sound of her name, the applause, the smirk, the victory that would prove every insult, every doubt, every sneer had been right all along. And the winner is... The host's voice boomed through the hall, cutting through the tension like a blade. Her name. My name. For a heartbeat, I thought I had misheard. The world seemed to freeze, the syllables echoing as though they belonged to someone else. Then the hall erupted. Applause thundered, cheers rose, cameras flashed. My body jolted with shock, tears springing to my eyes faster than I could blink them away. I had won. My hands trembled as I stood, the conqueror, but like the conquered. The sight nearly undid me. For years, her voice had been the loudest in the room. Tonight, for the first time, my name had drowned it out. I reached the stage, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the applause anymore. The trophy gleamed as it was handed to me, heavy and solid, as though it carried not just recognition, but the weight of every battle I had fought to get here. I stood at the podium, blinking against the blinding lights, the crowd stretching endlessly before me. For a second, words failed. My throat closed, my chest heaved, and I thought I might crumble under the enormity of it all. Then I remembered Elaine's words, "Win for you." So I began. "I never thought I'd stand here tonight," I said, my voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. Because for most of my journey, I was told I didn't belong. I was told I was too sensitive, too naive, too weak. I was told I would fail. And I believed it sometimes. I almost gave up. More than once, the hall grew quiet, the clinking glasses silenced, the murmurs fading into stillness. My story, raw and unpolished, filled the room. "But here's what I learned," I continued. "Sensitivity isn't weakness. Empathy isn't a flaw. They are power, the kind of power that builds, not destroys, the kind of power that listens, that connects, that refuses to quit even when the world tells you it should. That is what carried me here tonight. Not perfection, not privilege, persistence." The words poured out of me, not rehearsed, but lived. I spoke of the silent nights, scribbling lessons into a journal no one else would ever see. I spoke of the betrayals that cut me and the mentors who stitched me back together. I spoke of the invisible workers, the assistants, the interns, the ones who kept everything running while others took the credit. "This award isn't just mine," I said, my voice breaking now. "It belongs to every person who has ever been told they weren't enough, who stayed anyway, who fought anyway, who believed quietly in their own worth even when no one else did. This is for us." By the time I finished, tears blurred my vision, but I could feel the energy in the room. People rose to their feet, not politely, reporters scribbled furiously. The world was watching her retreat just as much as it had watched my victory. And as I stood on the stage, heart racing, I realized the war between us wasn't over. Tonight, I had won, but her rage promised that the next battle was already on it. Winning wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The applause from that night still echoes in my memory, but what came after surprised me more than the moment itself. Because victory isn't just a single instant, it's the ripples that follow. The way the world shifts when your name is suddenly on everyone's lips. The morning after the ceremony, I woke to dozens of messages. My phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists requesting interviews, colleagues sending congratulations, strangers writing about how my speech had touched them. Headlines blared, "Underdog triumphs, empathy wins big," a moment that redefined success. For years, I had been invisible. Now the spotlight was mine. At first, it was overwhelming. I stumbled through interviews, my voice shaky, unsure how to handle the sudden attention. Every journalist wanted to know the same thing. How does it feel to prove everyone wrong? But I realized quickly that my answer wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving myself right. Winning wasn't about silencing doubters, I told one reporter. It was about listening to the voice inside me that refused to quit. Those words struck a chord. People replayed them, shared them, quoted them in articles. Slowly, the narrative around me shifted. I wasn't just the underdog anymore. I was the woman who turned sensitivity into strength, who stood on stage and refused to apologize for empathy. My career exploded in directions I hadn't imagined. Opportunities poured in. Invitations to speak at conferences, offers to lead new projects, partnerships I had once only dreamed of. My inbox, once a graveyard of rejections, became a flood of possibilities. But the greatest change wasn't external. It was internal. Because with every handshake, every stage, every new door that opened, I felt a strange lightness inside me. The hunger for validation, the desperate need to prove myself to my sister, to my family, to the doubter, a cycle that had reshaped me completely. I thought back to the betrayal, the times my sister had mocked me, the colleagues who had sabotaged me, the way I had been underestimated and dismissed. Those betrayals had nearly broken me, but they had also revealed what I valued most: authenticity, truth, connection. Then came exposure, the way lies and facades had unraveled, the way the industry's politics had revealed themselves in harsh light, the way my own fears had surfaced when I least expected them. Exposure hurt, but it was necessary. It stripped away illusions and forced me to see the world and myself as we truly were. Justice followed, though not in the way I had once imagined. It wasn't about revenge or even about winning against my sister. Justice was standing on that stage, holding that trophy, and speaking words that belonged entirely to me. Justice was rewriting the story of who I was. And finally, transformation. Not just the external transformation from underdog to winner, but the internal one. From a woman desperate for approval to one who had learned the greatest truth of all: that strength isn't born in defiance of sensitivity. It is sensitivity, sharpened by resilience and rooted in authenticity. I carried that realization into everything I did next. My projects weren't just about innovation anymore. They were about people. I built teams that valued listening as much as speaking, empathy as much as strategy. I mentored younger professionals, reminding them that their voices mattered even when they felt small. I shared my story openly, not as a polished success tale, but as proof that stumbling, doubting, and struggling are part of the path. And with each step forward, I watched the ripple widen. People began to repeat my words. Sensitivity isn't weakness, it's power. They wrote it on signs, quoted it in speeches, carried it into their own battles. That was the real victory, not the trophy sitting on my shelf, but the spark that spread to others. As for my sister, her path remained her own. I didn't chase her approval, and I didn't wait for her apology. Maybe it will come someday. Maybe it won't. But either way, I am no longer defined by her voice. For the first time in my life, I am defined by mine. And so, standing on the other side of that, what if the very thing they told you was weakness is the very thing that will make you unstoppable? If this story inspired you, make sure to hit like, drop a comment sharing the moment you almost gave up and what kept you going. And don't forget to subscribe with the bell on so you never miss another powerful story. Because sometimes the very thing they call weakness is the thing that makes you unstoppable.